Good morning, guys. I don't know about you. When I first saw that, I was like, I got a lot of feelings. I really do pray that Tampa Bay only ever knows this kind of devastation from a simulation video. But still, last year wasn't a simulation, and a lot of us are still shouldering the weight of the disaster and the destruction. We've seen what hurricanes can do. We've seen our neighborhoods flooded, families displaced, weeks without power, and many of us were directly affected. And in every disaster, this truth becomes more and more clear, like governments can't do it alone. Nonprofits can't do it alone. Churches can't do it alone. We really need each other. And so to that end, I'm really grateful for you guys being here today. Just grateful that we have so many churches represented, leaders that made a point to show up today. Thank you guys for being here. I know we're waiting on a few more folks that'll be joining us kind of later in the morning. Obviously, a hurricane is not the only kind of disaster that our area might face. You know, there may be other times that our network that we're trying to develop, this effort to kind of link arms will be called and needed. But given the reality that we are at hurricane season and we faced some severe storms last year, we're going to focus on storms as for instance, our main kind of example, concrete illustration of what we need to talk about. And much in the way of mitigation and preparation are things that happen year-round. There are things that we need to be taking proactive steps to make our buildings and our people more resilient during blue sky times. For those of you not familiar, we just refer to blue sky as like the time that we're not under, like right now, we're not in the middle of a storm, and then gray sky being the time like a storm is coming, a storm is hitting. So those would be the two kind of, if you're not familiar with that terminology. But not all disasters give us the kind of heads up that a hurricane does. And so while much of what we talk about will be in terms of preparing for a storm and the days maybe leading up to landfall, I want to encourage you to be thinking about how you might help your churches, your congregations, your communities be proactive now and every day throughout the year, because we might not always have the luxury of that kind of preparation. And plus, the peace of mind that comes from having a prepared building, having a prepared staff team, having a prepared congregation will bring so much more peace of mind than any last-minute attempts. So a little bit of history, I guess, of this conversation, at least how for us it has emerged. Last year, not long before the storms actually, and completely unrelated, I met with a group of leaders that were affiliated with or part of let's say a network of some sort. So like Church United works with a lot of folks in the church leadership community. There was a network of CEO kind of group that meets up, a philanthropic network, another works in foster care space. But these alliances and these networks were, we met together and we said, maybe we should know each other. We started just talking about would it be good for our networks to kind of know one another? And we were like, why? I don't know. Who knows? And I remember in that conversation, what if there was a storm? For instance, But it's I don't know. There may come a time where the city, the county, our region needs us and needs us to be able to coordinate. And would we be able to? Would we be able to communicate? Do we know each other? And so we just had one meeting, and we just said, if our networks if we knew one another, you create what we would call a meta network or a dense network. The more nets you lay over one another, the less holes, right? And so we're like, hey, that's a good idea. We should just and we just said, yeah, maybe we should meet. So we literally met one time, and then there were storms immediately. So first Helene, and then immediately after, Milton's threatening. And so we go, hey, we just shot an email to that little crew. So let's jump on a Zoom call. So we jump on a Zoom call, and we just acknowledge we're not ready. We literally had one meeting. We just said, we should talk again. We had no clue what to do, but we agreed that we would just try to gather as much information as we could, as much direction as we could. We would send it to one another and as much information as we could to our network. So I quickly found my way into the COAD meetings and started making a bunch of connections with a lot of the folks that are kind of in this space to learn as fast as I could. Just scribbling notes that I could send out these daily briefings to our network and that they could share with their network or reword and however. So we did what we could, and so we learned some things really quickly. Actually, when I started showing up at COAD meetings, I realized the EOC and other disaster response agencies were actually looking to us for information, like what's going on out there. And we're showing up going, we're looking for information. And I realized really quickly, like, the need for this kind of two-way communication. But we hadn't primed our networks. Like, this was like, what's happening? Like, we're doing like foster care. You know what I mean? Like, they're just like, it's just all of a sudden a tone change, and they're like, we hadn't had this conversation yet. And, but like, so for instance, like, I was working a lot in the university area, which you guys saw, like, was devastated with flooding that was unexpected and this and that. And so I was able to report on what I was seeing. So I come back and I'm saying, hey guys, this is what's going on. And I remember reaching out to someone, I think I was talking with Elizabeth Dunn, and she was like, you know, we have this map of incidents that have been reported, and there's like nothing there. Like, nothing's been reported. And I'm like, I'm reporting it. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on out here. But because we made that known, resources are deployed, there was response, like things started happening, like immediately, like impressively. And we realized, like, there's a real need for a decentralized eyes and hands, like we're everywhere, to see what's going on, to report back, but then also this centralized huddle where there is a command that is going, hey, we have resources and we can deploy resources. And so there's like this balance, this dance between the centralized and the decentralized. And we thought, hey man, this is really important. We also learned that gray sky, disaster is no time to effectively build a network. Like, it's too late. Like, I'm trying to have these conversations. We're calling churches, we're calling these leaders, and we're going, hey, like, you know, people are upset, they're fatigued, they're disoriented, they're confused, they're worried about their own space and people, and they weren't prepared. And so it's too late to have conversations about bigger asks. So the county's saying, hey, we need somewhere to deploy a truck that's coming with resources that needs to go into this community, connect us with a church that's there. But also the church is never, we're led by a committee, and we have to have there's like all these questions, and we've never thought about this. And so we're like, oh man, we need to be having these conversations throughout the year. Man, it's too late, and so we start realizing these things. And then there was a staff from Homeland Security that was in town during that time. Some of you guys know Bob. Bob was awesome. But he explained like how important nonprofits and faith communities are in the immediate kind of aftermath of a storm. And he told me how laws had actually been changed after Katrina, I believe, that like local local municipalities like have to be available to and work with nonprofits and faith communities that are kind of out in the community, because often they're operating as a first responder. They're the first on the scene. They're the first to sees what's going on. Actually, can you flip to this next slide? So this is from a friend that was doing some research. Is he up there? You up there? Yeah. So this is just a friend. We're not connected to all these folks, but a friend that was doing research on churches in particular in the Tampa Bay area. This is what he was able to find. They're everywhere. And so when I was talking to Bob, he's like, listen, these are the people that they have established trust. They know the culture in the neighborhood. They have a community built. They have buildings and people literally everywhere. This is the physical and social infrastructure that is needed at a time like this. And so one of the things we learned is like, guys, we need to have these conversations year round so that the relationships are built. The connections are made. The assets can be mapped. The potential building uses could be considered ahead of time to go, how could we use a space like this or a parking lot like this or a gymnasium like this that is, I don't know if you guys wandered into there, but there's a gym over here. But and how could we, in a unified way, take responsibility to respond to the cries for help in our area? And so what we learned in our little crew is while our efforts were serious, they were ill-equipped. And while our networks are powerful in the things that they're focused on, they weren't prepared to shift gears like this. But we did what we could. And so those briefing emails that I sent out every day, just in the subject line, said respond together. It wasn't a brand or an org. It's literally just a call to action. It's what we need to do. We need to respond, and we need to work together. By the way, a lot of good did come from the efforts, the response. I mean, we were able to, that little crew raised $130,000 that we were able to grant out to some churches that had sustained some damage with some buildings, and also some families that needed new roofs and vehicles and things like that. It wasn't a huge amount of money to us. It was good, though. It was like something happened. Communities were mobilized. Several churches got logged into crisis cleanup and were able to start deploying their people to, there's families throughout the community that need help, so they're out going to clean out places that have been flooded, cut tree limbs. Resources were shared, volunteers were deployed, lessons were learned. And so that's where this kind of emerges. So Respond Together is not a new organization. It's not an organization. It's not an entity. It's a call to action, and it's a call to unity. That's it. Our prayer is that you guys would own this, that you would take, say, this is a call on us in our community to take responsibility. So it's a growing network of just faith communities in our region, committing to walking with our neighbors every day, before, during, and after disaster. And so we're going to be enriched by partnering with local emergency response teams, disaster response organizations. And so, what does partnership look like? There is, I think some of our communications that we put out, I think we should have led with, we don't want your money. That's not what we're doing. We're not after money. I think that brought up some, what is partnership? And it's not an org, it's not a fund. And our prayer is that we all just take responsibility for the condition of our city and the needs of our neighbors. And I think faith communities are really important. And this is what we've heard from emergency response leadership, but then also as we've been networking with these churches going, man, there's a real need here. So what we are asking a few things that congregations would go, hey, we identified a couple points of contact for our community that would be in touch with, both to receive information as we're gathering information to kind of send out to this network of churches, but then also to report back, in incidents, we go, hey, we're good here, we sustained damage here, and just having some set-aside point of contact. Also just going, hey, let's establish the capacity of your properties, now, ahead of time, to say, hey, we do have a parking lot, we do have a building, we can have those conversations now, ahead of time, and start thinking about, building use, but also volunteer base. Do we have people? Are we getting them equipped? So that's another kind of ask, is just to be thinking ahead of time about those things. And then just a general commitment to say, we're going to do our best to be responsive. Obviously, we can't make a ton of promises about what we will do, not knowing what is needed and what our capacity is when it goes down, but to say, to the best of our ability, we will communicate, we will respond, and we will try to be part of this. And so today, this morning, during this session, what we're going to talk about is readiness for churches in three kind of categories. We're going to talk about the church as a building and how we prepare and leverage our facilities. We're going to talk about the church as a congregation and how we ensure people are safe and cared for and equipped. And then we're going to talk about church as neighbor, how we look outward, how we take care of the vulnerable that are around us. So each of these matter, but I think the ultimate goal really is of this session, but also Respond Together as a whole, is the church as a loving neighbor and moving beyond risk management and our own kind of core thing, but also to become a witness to the love and the presence of God in the community when we're in the midst of pain and chaos. It's time for us to show up. And so we're going to talk about these three dimensions in a few different time horizons. So there's a handout kind of in that folder you got, and I think there's a few handouts about those three categories that you can kind of look at or take notes on or whatever. But those are broken up into three time horizons. So blue sky, kind of year-round efforts. This is when the networks and relationships can be built, planning can be done, preparation can be done. And then you'll see gray sky activation. This is a storm is coming, it's time. We need to kind of activate our communities and our network. And then finally, you'll see days, weeks, months after the storm when we're responding to the needs and working toward recovery. As I walk through these today, I'm probably just going to use blue sky, gray sky. I'll stick with the 2 time horizons like verbally because I think that's just clear enough. But I do think this added level of nuance in the handouts will be helpful as you take this back to your community, to your congregation, and start working through this with leadership. Because I know some of you are just like, hey, go on behalf of our church today and kind of bring these things back. And so we just wanted to give you guys those tools. But here's the thing, much of the work isn't just about hurricanes, right? It's about building trust and resilience year-round in blue skies, in everyday life, so that when gray skies come, we are prepared. And so my hope is that by the end of this session, you won't just walk away with a checklist for your buildings and your people. I mean, we're giving you that, but also to have a clear call that our churches are stronger together. We're better when we are unified, when we lock arms, when we show up as one. Our cities and our county need that. I do want to acknowledge that a lot of churches are starting from scratch. So this is kind of an orientation session, right? It'll be very kind of 101, and so for some of you, you're like, right, it's great. But we want to make sure that we've established kind of a foundation. So we're giving you essential questions and tools to bring back to your church and to talk with your communities. So it's not everything at once. It's actually probably not even possible. But just emphasizing the fact that preparedness isn't seasonal. This is something we need to be thinking about this is a concrete way that we can love our neighbors and invest in these relationships year-round. And so with that in mind, let's begin where I think most of us start with our buildings, because when a storm is coming, some of the first questions that we'll ask is like, is our facility ready? Is it safe? Will it be damaged? Will we be able to use it afterwards? And I think this is natural. For many of our communities, the building is our biggest investment, our biggest asset. And it's also a place where ministry happens kind of week in and week out. And so in this section, we're going to think about our facilities in 2 ways. What can we do now year-round before a storm hits? But then also, how do we respond and recover kind of afterward so that our buildings can serve our people and serve our neighbors in a time of need? So I'm going to start with kind of the blue sky pre-storm year-round. Most of the work that pays off in a storm is actually done beforehand during blue sky times. So things like routine maintenance. Like first, it's simple, regular maintenance, caring for your building. Inspect the roof, the windows, the doors, making sure that leaks and weak points are dealt with, clearing out gutters, trimming trees around the property. I mean, many of us know like how much damage a loose branch can do when we kind of look around after a storm. Utilities and equipment, making sure that you and someone else, that multiple people know kind of how to shut off electricity or gas or water in the event of a flood. Not just assuming that like that's a property manager's job, but kind of like democratizing some of this information and having people set aside to go, we kind of know how this is done. Testing generators regularly, storing fuel safely. Records and insurance. This is something I think that gets overlooked a lot. We actually ran into a lot of folks that did sustain damage and didn't have all of the stuff that they needed. So like backing up your insurance policies, making sure they're up to date, having deeds and financial records stored, probably hard copies in waterproof containers, so that you can get access to those. It's a good idea to take photos and videos of your property regularly, at least once a year. I know this kind of might seem tedious, but like if you are making insurance claims, this can become invaluable. And then assigning responsibility. Don't assume like the idea that this should fall on the pastor is crazy. It's just, that's going to go poorly. But realizing like there's a community of folks that can take responsibility and identify and clarify responsibilities and go like someone knows that and there's a backup person to that. And then obviously during, after storm or gray sky, when a storm is imminent or has passed, the questions shift from maintenance to mission. So there's obvious things before a storm, right? Securing and bringing in outdoor items, benches and playground equipment, things like that. Boarding up windows if necessary, double checking maybe safe interior rooms in the building that could be utilized for maybe a shelter in place. I know several church communities that actually decided to weather the storm together in their buildings. One is a way to look out for them because there was a safe place in them. And this is particularly important if you work with vulnerable populations, that maybe this is a much better solution. But also, by the way, it's also just a great way to build community, getting those people, it's like a unplanned lock-in or something. You can get everyone together and kind of really build relationships among your folks. After a storm, like as soon as it's safe, doing a damage assessment. Walking the perimeter, walking the property. If damage has been done, take photos, file insurance claims as quickly as possible. Document any expenses. This isn't just like about like, oh, we can get reimbursed, although that's probably important, but positioning the church to get back to leveraging its space and serving as quickly as possible. We would ask, too, as a network, that as we establish better communication with each other, that you communicate back with the network. Like, hey, we're good. This is what's going on in the community, but also like if there is damage done at your building, we want to know. There may be ways that we can facilitate and help, even as we were able to do last time with a few of these churches that sustained some damage. And then reopening as fast as possible as like a hub of ministry, as a place to serve the community. This is where like your preparation will translate into kind of mission to be able to meet the needs of your community. So while some churches may be damaged, others are in good shape. And some of you may be able to house storm victims, that people that need a place as a shelter, right? I know even in this building, they're talking about this gymnasium over here may be able to be equipped to do exactly that. Maybe you can't do that, but you could. There's teams that come into town. Team Rubicon is an example that was coming in and it's like, hey, we need a place to stay while we're in town. We're from out of town and we're going to be responding. And so there's a lot of groups that'll come in, and churches are an ideal place to go, hey, we have a team that's going to be here. We can just camp out in the place, especially if your building has like a kitchen or a place to shower or something like that. Maybe that's a way that you could be utilized. But not everyone's going to be able to do that. However, you may still have electricity, and you could set up and allow neighbors to come in and charge devices so that they can communicate or get on their computers. Or maybe you have AC and people don't, and they could come in and use AC just during the day. Or literally just receiving donations or being a distribution hub. There's a lot of ways that your buildings can be utilized. Maybe you have a parking lot that the canteen, Salvation Army canteen, or a food truck can pull up in to offer prepared meals. I know in the last storm there was these comfort stations, and there's like maybe the property could be used. And by the way, I think this is an amazing opportunity for churches to go, hey, why don't we help man those? Why don't we help serve the community at these and meet needs and walk with our neighbors? And all of these small things can make an enormous difference when the community is hurting. So when we talk about the church as a building, it's not just about protecting your asset. Obviously, we care about that. But it's about ensuring that our facilities are positioned to keep ministry going and to keep serving our neighbors and to utilize them as best as we can in the response efforts. So if you're going to take one thing away from this particular section of this, I just want to say the more you prepare now, the more you document now, the more you think ahead now, the better position you're going to be able to be to utilize and leverage that space when the call comes in, when the time is needed during Gray Skies. So we want to encourage you guys. Maybe you're not the person that makes those decisions. And with a lot of churches, there isn't a person that makes these decisions. There's committees and things take time. So we want to encourage you, like, go have those conversations and prompt those conversations now. And so we're going to shift from the building itself to the people that make up the church, the congregation. And if our congregations aren't prepared, it's going to be hard for them to care for one another, much less their neighbors. And this section is about making sure that your people are ready, both individually and their households, as households, but also collectively as a body. And again, we're going to look at these same two time horizons. Because a resilient congregation begins with members that are prepared. So here's some things you can be thinking about now during Blue Sky and just throughout the year. But I would encourage all of you to make a congregant information list. Hopefully you have something like this already. But every church should have a simple, updated contact list, but not just of names and phone numbers and emails, but where they live, their flood zones, evacuation zones, particular vulnerabilities. Is someone there on oxygen? Does someone not have transportation? Are they in a mobile home? Like, kind of having some of these vulnerabilities. Are they elderly and alone? This could be a lifeline, and I would also encourage you to print that out and have that available, because if power goes down, you're going to want to be able to pull out a hard copy. Maybe also keep that in a watertight container. Getting the families ready, basics, right? Encouraging every household in your congregation to prepare a go bag and supplies if they need to evacuate, if they need food and water on hand, having these things ready, medications, important documents, also waterproof containers, flashlights, phone chargers, some cash is a good idea to have on hand if ATMs are down. And these are simple ways that we can help keep our families safe and reduce the level of panic that is kind of like existential when a storm is coming. Having communication plans, like getting things, and this will be contextual to your different kind of groups and how you guys communicate, but how will they communicate with one another? And actually encouraging families, especially if they're in different locations, to have an out-of-state contact that they can get in touch with, someone whose phone is not going down, someone whose access is not going down, so that they can kind of get in touch with someone out of state if they're not in the same place, so they can communicate like, hey, we're good, or we're in need, or something like that. I would encourage you guys to develop a care call team. So a small team of people, volunteers in your community that can take responsibility for calling and checking in with members, especially those that are vulnerable. And I would say don't wait for a hurricane. This is just a good practice. Like, check on your people. So throughout the year, make some calls, check in with your people, kind of establish this regular communication. And then I would just say encourage your communities to take advantage of training opportunities. So CERT training, for instance, community emergency response teams. Send your people, say, hey, why don't a few of our people go get some training, CPR, first aid. These aren't just useful in a disaster, but they help equip our communities to have some competencies within them throughout the year. And then in a storm, congregations will need structure and compassion. And so as the storm approaches, activating that call care team, checking in on your vulnerable members, making sure they know their evacuation routes, their zones, if they have to leave, helping them out. And these calls can literally save lives. And so you can just go, hey, we've got this list. We're going to start hitting up our people. Communication during the storms, and I would encourage multiple ways of doing this, right? So you have some phone trees built out. We have phone trees, we have group text, we have social media, we have a group me, as many of these iterations as you guys can. And again, you'll need to contextualize this for your own kind of crew. But having a way to, and by the way, I would also say it's probably a good idea to have some pre-written communication ahead of time, so you're not having to draft everything kind of on the fly, but kind of here are some incidents that we might be in, just having some templates ready to go. And then post-storm wellness checks, after the storm passes, calling those folks again, hey, are you good? Did you evacuate safely? Are you back home? Are there medical needs? Do we need tarps? Do we need help? Finding out, maybe people are good and they're available to go and, hey, we can help meet some of the needs. But having that congregation list will make those calls and visits doable. And then mobilizing volunteers, right? So while some might be hit hard, others might be ready to serve. And this is the thing of why it's so important. We realize we're all over the place. Some region may be really devastated while another is good to go. It's okay, cool, we need to get over. And this is why building out these relationships and network are going to matter, so we can look out for one another and not just our own congregation, but also in our own congregation going, maybe one neighborhood is good and another's not, and taking care of our brothers and sisters. And I want to just encourage, not underestimating the need for spiritual and emotional care, because there is a lot of trauma that comes with loss and fear and pain. And so having space, maybe utilizing your own space to create a space for prayer, for counseling, for listening, for just gathering together. This can be as or more important for some than supplies, And so when we think about the church's congregation, the key question I think we need to be asking is, are our people ready? Our members, do they feel safe? Do they feel cared for? Because then they're going to be able to move outward, right? And actually look out for their neighbors, which is exactly where we're headed next. And I think what is the most important part of what we're trying to do is the response, the ability to be a loving neighbor, to serve our neighbors. So we talked about church as building. We talked about church as congregation. But we all know that the mission doesn't stop at our walls. It's not about just what happens within our buildings, right? And the church has always been called to love and to serve our neighbors. And so this is where I think a network like this, Respond Together, really comes alive. Churches across Tampa Bay working together, not only to care for their own, but to show up and serve their neighbors and the wider community when disaster strikes. So just like with our buildings and congregations, this starts long before the hurricane. And you all know that loving your neighbors year-round is important, and it's an important commitment. But it takes intentional action, and then especially in the days leading up to a storm or the weeks following a storm. I would say the best, most loving response in the midst of a storm is going to be built on the relationships that exist beforehand. And so I would encourage all of you, regardless of what dot you represent or kind of where you're at, to start thinking about mapping your community a little bit, like literally the streets right around your building. This could be a powerful thing, like where are the elderly and vulnerable folks in our neighborhood that surround our building? Who doesn't have in the same way you would do that for your congregation? Maybe they're not part of that, but just knowing the area, having a basic list or map and phone numbers. These can be life-saving tools in a way to really engage your neighborhood, knowing the vulnerable in particular. Disaster really magnifies existing vulnerabilities. But I would say build relationships with the neighboring apartment complex. Is there a senior center nearby? Migrant communities. Folks living on the streets, unhoused neighbors. And making a point to know them, to introduce yourself now. To have those relationships established now. And this is like stuff like for churches, like basic stuff, like year-round outreach, like doing outreach. This is something we're like, hey, we care about doing this. And I'm saying like, throw a block party, distribute some food like just on Thursday, like for whatever reason. Plant a community garden. These aren't just ministries, they're resilience strategies. Because when a hurricane is coming, it's not the first time you're connecting. It's not the first time that you've been shoulder to shoulder. But, by the way, if we see a storm next month and you haven't made those connections already, don't hesitate to knock on the doors. If you haven't connected already, like hit them up, knock on the door. And then I would say partnership with other churches. Because like we said, no church can carry this load alone. So get to know the congregations around you. Different denominations, whatever. Like look at the map and go, who's the next one over? Like what's the next dot? And reach out to them, talk to them. And maybe even build that relationship for this sake, like uniting all of these churches. But then at the same time going, hey, if you're there and we're here, how many blocks are between us? Maybe coordinate a little bit. Like so that you know, like, hey, we'll look out for these streets, and you kind of plan ahead of time, like which neighbors we're checking on, which ones we can trust that you guys will check on. Because ultimately what we're thinking is if we can network enough of these dots throughout the county, throughout our counties, that we can then map these out and say, we've got territory to take responsibility for. I would say now, like deciding what you can offer. Not every church is going to be able to open up as a Red Cross shelter. That's fine. But maybe we have a parking lot that we can serve food out of. Maybe we have a kitchen that we can, so like our organization, we distribute a lot of groceries about 6 days a week with the kinship. We share groceries like all the time. After a storm, groceries aren't that helpful. And but we didn't have a kitchen to prepare them, but maybe you do. And maybe we can bring that food to you, that those could be turned into prepared meals. We still have the asset, but it needs to be, so like maybe you have a kitchen, maybe you have volunteers that can serve in those. But thinking ahead of what you can do. And this is like a silly example, but to me it was like a really powerful thing during the storms this last year. So I'll just share this briefly. There's a group we work with called Mutual Aid Disaster Relief, I think. And they have a trailer that is basically like solar panels, battery banks, and then just plugs. And in University area, there was just like no power for all these blocks and it was flooded out. So we're like, hey, can we borrow that? And we drove it out into the community, which we already know a bunch of neighbors. So we were easily able to go, hey guys, we're here, because we're there all the time, because that's where we share groceries and this and that. So we show up with this different trailer. We pull up with that, and we're like, hey, look, you can charge your phone, your laptop. But then the local football coach, who I'm really close friends with, Coach Ross, comes over. He lives across the street. he comes over and he's got this big, the party box, the JL, whatever, the big party box thing. He brings that thing out and we plug that in. It's, the Storm Thursday? This was Friday night, I think. And it was kind of 9 in the evening and like everyone's hanging out around this charging station. Like everyone's like, charge this, charge that. They had little battery powered fans charging that. I was like, this is great. But we plugged that speaker in. And honestly, the gift of music, it literally turned into like a block party. It was the best, to me, it was the best offering imaginable, was music and joy and levity. And people brought drinks out and just hung out around the speaker. And like in the midst of darkness, in the midst of chaos, there was just a party and joy. And I'm like, this is one of the best things I saw happen. It was accidental, incidental. Like coach is like, I like music. Brought it out and it was incredible. But like, be creative. Like the little things that you can offer, they go so far. And then network participation. Like you're here. Thank you for being here, participating, building relationships. Because guys, we are stronger when we are together, when we are one. And we can map territory. We can share resources. We can coordinate with one another so that the whole body becomes visible and works together, locking arms in a time of crisis. And then when it goes down, when the storm comes, this is where the love of neighbor becomes like super concrete, right? Super concrete. So pre-storm, the storm is forecast, and this is time for like heightened outreach, right? Checking on those neighbors that you've mapped, like going and checking on Miss Mabel, like, hey, we know you, we know you're here. We may not have like a huge, long-lasting relationship or whatever. Hopefully we do. But whatever, like checking on those vulnerable neighbors. Are you ready? Do you know your evacuation zone? Do you need help with sandbags, boarding up, transportation? Like how can we help? And these simple acts show that the church is present and looking out for them, caring for them. And then post-storm hubs, like utilizing your building, like we talked about in the building section. So whether it's large or small, open it as a site for distribution, as a site to receive donations. This is something, by the way, with the county. We've been talking to this a lot. Like Trey and I have been having a conversation like, hey, we need all throughout the county's huge, by the way, just Hillsborough County. It's huge. So like, just in South County, we've got these different areas. We need a church in each of those areas that can say, hey, we could receive a truckload of stuff if this is the area that it's needed in. But we need to map those out now. And so we do want to follow up with you guys and go, we know your location, have these conversations, go back and talk to the leadership, the pastors, so that we can start plotting these in the different areas so that we have your number, we have a little Rolodex, and we can at least hit you up when it goes down and say, like, can we send a truck there? Can you receive this? Can you distribute from here? And then after the storm, whatever it is that you've decided, do it quickly, communicate clearly, and open your doors so that your building becomes a sign of hope and stability in the middle of chaos. Door-to-door assessment. Like, look, the storm's passed. Organize that small team. Walk those neighborhoods, that territory that we've mapped out. And report needs back to us, back to the network, back to the EOC. Just making sure that those things are known. Don't assume that people are going to come to you, especially vulnerable neighbors. So we were walking one of the neighborhoods that we work in, and we came across, this is days later, unfortunately, but there was a woman, elderly, could barely walk. She uses a walker, but can't go far. Her car was crushed by a huge branch. Her power out, and the power lines had been taken down. And she's sitting in the dark. She has no contact with anyone. The phone is long dead. And she's just sitting there on the porch days later. And it's like, there's stories like this all over town, right? It's like, and they're not necessarily coming to you or your building. And obviously, and honestly, even some of the things that we show up and do resources, like literally 2 blocks is too much to expect people to come over. It's like, we need to go to them, more like ambulance than hospital. You know what I mean? And this is where it's like having teams that are built out to say, like, we're going to go walk these streets, or we're going to go to the comfort station and load our trunk with food and take it over just a couple blocks to love and care for these neighbors, to knock on their doors, to check on them. Obviously, we mentioned emotional and spiritual care for your congregation, but also for your neighbors, right? Checking on people that have lost their homes and their possessions. This can be like devastating psychologically, existentially. Being able to be a listening ear, a loving neighbor, to throw your arm around them, to cry with them, to walk with them. Presence, can be a real gift. It's very simple, and even if you have no resources, you can offer that. You can offer that. And then, guys, ongoing recovery. Like cameras leave, the many of the teams kind of go away. The news cycle is over. But as we see around our community, there's so many people still devastated, not back in their homes. Things are still destroyed. And so joining and staying engaged with COAD and VOAD and long-term recovery groups. And I know that not every congregation is going to have someone that can be part of those, but that's also why we want to build this network so we can, some of us can, and then we can communicate back to a larger network of congregations and churches. And so big picture, our buildings matter, our congregations matter, we want to care for them. But the reason Respond Together exists is because our neighbors matter. And we realized last year, we need to do the work to start building this network. And so this is a small step right now in the effort, but you guys have other partners, other churches. Over time, we want to kind of grow this network and have these communications. So reaching out to your neighboring communities and churches and congregations saying, guys, we need you to be part of this. There's not dues, it's not a club, it's not an organization, it's not a new job. It's just literally doing the thing that you're called to do in a coordinated way. And we have a great for instance that just passed to say, let's not let this go that way again, right? Let's leverage our communities, care for our communities, care for our neighbors. And so it's not just what can your church do alone. That's not the question. The question is, what can we do together? When we prepare our buildings, equip our people, and commit to our neighborhoods. And together we can cover our region, Tampa Bay, with a network of resilience and hope. And I think this is what it looks like for us to actually to live up to the call to love our neighbors. It's not just words, but in action, before, during, after a storm. And this is something, we're just to step up our game in ordinary times because it's what gives us the capacity to react during hard times. We have those relationships. We have these friendships built. So what I want to do is we're going to transition into a panel discussion. I know there's some organizations that haven't been super plugged in with the kind of emergency response kind of ecosystem, the professionals in this space. And so what we want to do is, guys, we can go ahead and call up. We're going to have a panel discussion. If you guys want to kind of come up here, and we'll do some. So Jessica, Katya, John, April, if you guys want to come up and have a seat. I think these mics are good. You might have to turn them on, but if you guys are good to just transition here into that.